Welcome to our transforming studio time. Remember last week during our podcast conversation with Marjolaine Walker when I said,
Forgiveness, topic for a whole nother time, but I feel like that has been taught so wrongly, and it's good to correct our beliefs and our thoughts around that.
well, today is that day. We're going to explore the topic of forgiveness. But before we dive into the art that I've been thinking about sharing with you, and also some books that have been helping me like rewrap my thoughts around forgiveness, and of course some Bible verses, let's listen in to see what Marjolaine said about how forgiveness helped her find compassion for herself and really transformed her healing journey and her relationship with God.
How you learned to love yourself. You had to be compassionate, almost picture your inner child as someone else's child so that you could have more compassion and grace towards her and be willing to stand up for her, which is standing up for yourself.
Exactly. Just learning the different ways, the different order of things. Because before, when I was getting inner healing, there was a big emphasis on forgiveness. And so here we would go minister to the young child, and then basically we would say, okay, now you have to forgive. And I've realized that your inner child may not be ready to forgive, even if you are. And it was just important to nurture that part of her and give her the choice and give her a voice to say, I'm not ready for that. And then
Yeah.
believing that God still hears my prayer, right? Because, it was kind of used as if you don't forgive right now, like God's not going to hear your prayers. And I don't believe that's God's heart or God's word, but I was coming out of that kind of background. So just having the freedom to say, you know what, I'm going to work this out with the Lord. I'm going to work this out with my young self. And when I do forgive, it's going to be real and it's going to be beautiful and it's not going to be forced. And once I started learning that, it was a lot easier to love myself because I didn't have the guilt of, oh no, I'm upset again. I must not have forgiven properly. I love processing all of this while doing art and allowing my young self to be like, you know what, that still hurts a lot. And I'm not ready for that. And it's not
Yeah.
sacrilegious or anything. I started seeing how much Jesus loved my young self. And that's how I was able to start loving her.
Ah,
Because I thought, if something horrible just happened to a little girl and Jesus came in, would he say to her, now you have to forgive or else I'm not going to hear you? Like he wouldn't. That's not a thing. It's not a thing at all. And yet that's how it felt, right? Before. When I started realizing Jesus would never speak to me like that because he loves me so much. And that's when I really opened my heart to my young self to be like, I'm so sorry that I've put you through that. These forced healing sessions where you were forced to forgive when you weren't ready. I think that was probably the one biggest thing that I've done that triggered being able to love myself.
to see yourself through God's eyes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love what you said too about you realize that God would never say those things to you. And so to picture him in those moments and asking him what he's actually wanting to speak right to you.
And that's exactly what I've brought into my art that heals is that it's a gentle and beautiful process. And if I cannot picture Jesus saying it to a child, then I don't want to picture it at all. Because I don't believe if you wouldn't say it to a child, he wouldn't say it to a grown woman either. It just makes it so much easier to love yourself and not be so hard on yourself when you see that Jesus isn't chastising you in this healing. He's not angry with you. He's holding you and he's bringing healing to you. And that's what I like to do in the group. Is just to encourage women to really hear the voice of the Lord and how he feels about them.
He's loving us and cheering us on. He's like, open the door.
Exactly, because look, all this is on the other side.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing this activity and these insights about your journey with us. Is there anything else that you want to say before we wrap up?
Just that healing through art, it's a gentle way to heal. There's no pressure. And you don't have to be an artist. You don't have to worry about anything. You just have to have a willingness to put a crayon on paper and let God speak, let your young self speak. And you don't have to be afraid that it's going to be some super painful things. Sure, there is some times when healing and remembering things can hurt, but honestly, when you're doing it through art, I find the Lord is just so gentle and he doesn't take you further than what you can handle. And as long as you're giving yourself grace, it's a beautiful process. It's not scary. Like I know some people are afraid to go into a healing journey because they think they're going to discover things that they didn't know, that they don't want to know. And you know what? The Lord is not going to do that to you until you're ready. It's not something to fear. And I find through art, he just speaks to you like with little things that you didn't expect. Those little bits, they're just so good for your soul.
Yeah. The other nice thing about art, if it does start bringing up stuff that's really hard, you can close the book or put something over the canvas or turn it around and you can take a break. It's a great container.
Exactly. And in
Yeah.
my group sessions, I just tell people you may need some extra help. You may need to make an appointment with someone to process some of the stuff. Maybe it's too much, and that's okay. It doesn't have to all come out here and when you have no one to help you. And it just depends what he's showing you. And, or sometimes he might show me a dream and it's like, oh, okay, like I might need some help with the steps to make that happen or whatever, but you can always close the book. Exactly.
Yeah. And again, circling way back to the beginning of our conversation, it happens in layers.
So cliche, but the onion story, it's true. You peel off one layer and then there's another. And sometimes God has the ability to get to the middle of the onion and peel off a layer that's all the way inside without going through all the other layers. Never know what he's going to do.
Yes, we never do know what God is going to do when we obey Him. I just watched, and I will link below, a little Instagram short video about how really the point is that we aren't enough on our own, and that is meant to help us rely on God because He is the one who takes what we have, our little mustard seed of faith, our little act of obedience, our little step of courage, and He performs the miracle that makes it enough. So as you re examine the commands that He gives us to forgive all of those who have hurt us in all sorts of little and ginormous ways, what does He do with our act of obedience? How does that free us? How does that transform our hearts? How does that transform our relationship with God and with others? Forgiveness is not easy. Forgiveness is nuanced. Forgiveness is not reconciliation, and it is not saying what they did was okay or letting them off the hook. I'll link below to a couple books that I'm currently reading and a couple Bible verses as well so that you can research that for yourself. I would love to hear what books have helped you on your journey towards a better understanding of forgiveness and what Bible verses help you do the hard task of forgiving. For the art today, it's really going to be about exploring one moment in your life where you were wounded, where there is a lingering hurt because it just feels impossible to forgive someone for what they've done or said to you or how they've overlooked you or whatever it is. Wounding comes in a lot of different forms. Think about that moment. Go back there in your mind. Collage it or draw it. And then ask God to reveal to you in that moment where He was, what He was doing, what He saw and what He heard, and what He wants to say to you. And let us know, if you want to, what insights that exercise brings you. And again, I'll have all of this listed below so it's a little easier to follow step by step. But I think you'll find that this exercise is pretty powerful. And it can take you just a few moments to do it, or it can take you several different moments of sitting through it. Just let God lead you. Let Him tell you what He's seeing, what He wants you to know, what He wants you to hear. Let Him speak to your heart.